Mariam now with all the business. She's also going to be talking about what Donald Tusk ended that statement with, which was a real warning about trade.
Absolutely.
There,
He did. He
Quite
said
amazing.
trade war is wrong. He said it's a bad thing. And I guess that's the line that's being pushed generally from Europe at the moment. In fact, a little earlier today, the European Union's Trade Commissioner reiterated that the bloc will retaliate to any US tariffs that hurt its economy. President Trump is expected to formally impose a 25% levy on steel imports and 10% on aluminium later this week. Well, late on Tuesday, his top economic advisor, Gary Cohn, announced his resignation in apparent frustration at President Trump's intentions, which are aimed at protecting US jobs. However, on the other side of the Atlantic, Cecilia Malmström expressed fears the US tariffs will cost thousands of European jobs. She also said countermeasures could include tariffs on products such as orange juice, jeans and motorcycles, which are all being drawn up. Well, let's talk now to Jennifer Hillman. She's Professor of International Trade at Georgetown University in Washington and, amongst other things, used to sit on World Trade Organization panel that settles trade disputes and was the US government's top lawyer on trade policy. Jennifer, you were the top lawyer on trade policy. If you had Mr. Trump's ear today, what would you be advising him?
Well, I think the first thing I would start with is that I would recommend that he not go down this road, because unequivocally putting tariffs on steel or aluminum is breaking the United States' commitments in the WTO that they would not charge tariffs in excess of the rates that are bound in our tariff schedule. And for most steel products, for example, the United States' bound rate is 0. So any charge in excess of 0 is a violation of our obligations, and that we should not be going down a road that does walk away from the trading rules that we agreed to and that the United States was very instrumental in shaping in the first place.
And yet he does want to go down that road. It's apparent that he wants to continue, and he's using, or there the US seems like it's going to be using national security as a way to get itself out of those obligations.
Yes, clearly the Trump administration is using what is a very old sort of Cold War era statute in the United States. So again, it's domestic U.S. law that says that you can impose tariffs or quotas if you find that imports are threatening the national security of the United States. Now, many here are questioning whether that's what this is really all about. I mean, if you look at steel, for example, imports in the United States of the kind of flat-rolled products that would be used by the military are less than 20% of our total amount of steel sold. And the sources of that steel are our friends and allies: Canada, the European Union, Mexico,
yes,
Brazil, Korea. So it doesn't make sense from a national security perspective to go down this road.
That's what Paul Ryan, the senior Republican, has said. He's concerned, isn't he, of the economic damage that could be caused. But also he made the point, didn't he, that the fact is that the main impact of these tariffs will be on US allies such as the European Union and on Canada, not so much on China, which is what the US really wants.
That's correct. Because the tariffs would be opposed at this point, we don't know whether any countries will be exempted. But obviously, one of the things to look for in the coming days is whether or not any countries are exempted entirely from these tariffs. And again, I would assume that Canada is at the top of the list, the European Union and others, for potentially being exempted. But at this point, we don't know what the president is going to do, and he has said that he does not intend to exempt any countries.
What are the WTO's role in all this? I know these things can take years, can't they? But what can the WTO do at this point?
Well, again, what the WTO is trying to do is to remind everyone that they are committed to a rules-based system. I think you heard the Director General of the WTO say very clearly on this issue of what about a trade war, that, you know, in essence, an eye for an eye will leave everybody blind and the world in a deep recession. So clearly the WTO is trying to use the bully pulpit, if you will, right now to encourage the United States to back away from this. Also, I think immediately will come a challenge within the WTO to whatever the United States does, because it is a clear violation of our obligations. I think the rest of the world will immediately challenge the WTO. And the third thing is, I think other countries like the European Union are looking at whether or not there are provisions within the WTO rules that will allow them to engage in this sort of retaliation without breaking their own commitments to the WTO.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a grey area, isn't it, Jennifer, in terms of what the European Union can or can't do. And also, you know, the European Union has said we're not looking for retaliation, we're looking for a rebalance. And yet the language it's been using so far outside of that tells a very different story, doesn't it?
Well, I think what the European Union is basically trying to say is that while the United States may characterize this as national security, it is effectively a safeguard, a global safeguard. And under the safeguard rules, the European Union is saying we do have the right to do this kind of rebalancing of the amount of our trade damage that was hurt. We have the right to put duties or tariffs on U.S. products up to that amount. The amount was recently computed by one of the lead trade economists here in Washington, Chad Bown at the Peterson Institute, as being for the European Union $2.6 billion. So the presumption is that the European Union could put 100% duties on $2.6 billion worth of U.S. goods that are currently entering the European Union market.
OK, Jennifer Hillman, so good to get your point of view on what I'm sure is going to be a contentious issue for many days, weeks and months to come. Don't forget you can get in touch with me and some of the team on Twitter. I'm at BBC Mariam, but for now, Lucy, back over to you.
Lovely to have you with us, Mariam. Thank you.